Thank you, Wendy, and thank you all for inviting me here. And it's a pleasure to deliver this address at your conference, your annual conference. Let me perhaps have two introductory words, one of gratitude and one of admiration. My word of gratitude is obviously for having organized this annual general meeting in Paris, and not only in Paris, in this place, which I don't know if you're aware of that, is very close to the central bank, to the Banque de France. Less than 5 minutes in walking distance. So for me, it was very convenient. I don't know if it was on purpose, but... And now my word of admiration. It's about 1 o'clock. It's lunchtime in Paris. It's spring. There is sun. I don't know if you saw it, but all the Parisians are outside eating at restaurants or in terraces. Everybody but ICMA. And you are probably the only one in this huge international city to be in the dark, working very hard at 1 o'clock in May 2023. Congratulations. Let me more seriously pay tribute to your collective contribution to international capital markets. I will not quote all of you, but let me stress in particular your emphasis on sustainable finance, which perfectly echoes our call alongside Christine Lagarde for what I call a green capital markets union. It's also completely in line with what the minister just said about this bill of green industry. And I think it's a very important way forward for Europe in the next years. But let me today focus on the short and medium term and on a topic which is slightly more technical, but I speak with highly skilled professionals, which is the transmission of monetary policy in the euro area. As you are aware, inflation has begun to fall back from 10.6% last October to 7% in April. And it is expected to recede by the end of the year, but it will still be too high. And while headline inflation has been declining, underlying price pressures are showing persistence. Our Governing Council has, as you know, already taken prompt and forceful actions to tighten the stance of monetary policy. The increase in policy rates since 2022 has been exceptionally rapid by any historical standards, 7 hikes in less than 10 months, amounting to 375 basis points so far. The primary question today is hence, and I will insist on that, not so much how much further we need to go with interest rate hikes, but how large is the pass-through of what is already in the pipe. Let me start with the first link in this pass-through. Evidence shows a quick and smooth pass-through of ECB decisions to broad financing conditions, which is the first step from monetary to financial. The growth rate of bank loans to households and firms has slowed due to a combination of higher borrowing rates, lower demand, and, for firms, tighter credit standards. Volumes of loans are decelerating in the euro area, even though their growth in outstanding remains positive, plus 3.3% for mortgages to households, and plus 5.2% for loans to businesses. By the way, as a side remark, the growth of loans in this country, in France, remains significantly higher than in the euro area average. But let me focus on the second step of monetary policy transmission, which goes from the overall financing conditions I just summed up to economy and to inflation. In the textbook theory, tighter financial conditions moderate aggregate demand and then decrease inflation with some lags. The estimated transmission lags of monetary policy vary in the literature from 1 year to more than 2 years. At the current juncture, several factors may bring us closer to the upper range of 2 years. And let me mention 3 of them. First, the current tightening cycle started from exceptionally low level of real interest rates. It is only from the end of last year, December 22, that we achieved positive real rates at all maturities. But we are now clearly, I stress it, in restrictive territory. Second, the proportion of fixed-rate long-term loans is particularly high by historical standards, as opposed to floating rates. This is welcome for financial stability, and it's important for many of you, especially for mortgages. But as a result, the pass-through of higher policy rates is more gradual. Third and last factor, and probably the most important one, the origin and sectorial composition of inflation matters. The current surge in inflation, as we all know, does not primarily originate, at least in Europe, in overheated demand, but in supply shocks, external ones. This has implications for the transmission lags. The rise in the price of commodities and input costs was at the root of inflation. They pass through to producer prices and subsequently to CPI, must be asymmetric, faster and more complete on the way up than on the way down. It implies that the current decline in energy and input costs, including agriculture, may not fully translate yet into lower inflation. Let me insist still more on services inflation. It's in part fueled by wage developments, and it has gradually, it was not at the origin, as I said, but it has gradually but steadily surged over recent quarters. And it is likely to become the dominant source of inflation in the euro area. Historically, services are the most persistent and important component of both headline and core inflation. And their shares in consumption has increased in the last 20 years. Services are less directly sensitive to interest rates. The dampening effect of monetary policy on aggregate demand will be felt, but it will take more time. This was a very summed up, simplified landscape of transmission, but what conclusions can be drawn for monetary policy? I suggest here again 3 conclusions. A, in the usual alleged time lag of 1 to 2 years for monetary transmission, our economic situation, for the reasons I described, is presently closer to the upper range, 2 years. And hence, this is a policy conclusion, the commitment I reaffirm today here to bring inflation back towards 2% by 2025 is consistent with the full transmission of the monetary tightening at work until summer 23. B, against this backdrop of significant transmission in the pipe and still to come in real economy, a deceleration in the size of our policy steps, as we decided early May, from 50 basis points to 25, was wise and cautious. We obviously keep our hands free, but we add the capacity of observing and monitoring the pass-through of our massive past hikes. Let me say it with other words. Persistence is now more important than speed. The duration for which we will maintain rates is now more important than the precise terminal level we will reach. Or, still in other words, for interest rates, as with ballistics, longer is becoming more important than higher. C. Hence, as you understand, our next rate decision should not focus such attention. I am aware this is a wish. We already have completed most of our rate hiking journey, and we are clearly in restrictive territory. That said, as I stressed already last January, I expect we will be at the terminal rate not later than by summer. I spoke of spring. I will now speak of summer in Europe. It's a very beautiful and long season. This is the important point, which starts in June and ends in September. It looks like stating the obvious, but it leads to an important conclusion. We have 3 possible governing councils, either to hike or to pause. But don't deduce from that a guidance or a preference for a given terminal rate. We will remain data-driven, looking meeting by meeting at the outlook for headline as well as for underlying inflation. And as I said, monetary transmission. Let me conclude. Monetary policy is at work, and rest assured we will do the job. We will bring inflation back towards 2%. We will do it with the necessary patience, looking at the 2025 horizon for full transmission, with the necessary persistence, maintaining restrictive interest rates for long enough, I stress duration, patience, persistence, and pragmatism, monitoring actual economic data. But once more, and let me end with this thought, once more, monetary policy cannot be the only game in town. Remember, we said it some years ago in a symmetric situation where inflation was too low. I think it's important and appropriate to say it also in the different situation we are in. What do I mean? Fiscal policies should adjust and consolidate. First and foremost, scrapping energy subsidies, as the European Commission rightly advocated yesterday. Wage negotiations and markup decisions by firms should incorporate the expected decrease in inflation. And still more, structural reforms are needed more than ever to increase the supply-side capacity and flexibility in Europe and in France. Inflation is a question of balance between demand and supply. Monetary policy can deal with demand, but it's important also that structural policies deal with supply. And this is where Capital Markets Union, once more, would greatly help to finance investment and innovation and hence reduce inflation. Let us acknowledge it. If we are lagging behind today in Europe in some domain, it is not in the domain of monetary policy, it is in this domain of supply transformation. Thank you for your attention.